So my name is James Moore. I'm an independent consultant and software developer and a RethinkDB fan. And like Christina said, I have a bunch of screencasts. They're all free, so you should check them out at my website, which isn't listed here, but it's just knowthen.com. So here's the agenda for tonight. I've got a little presentation we're going to start with, and then I created a game that you guys are going to play in a few minutes. Okay, so you're going to play this game from your cell phone, and it's going to show up here. Don't get super excited. It's not a gamer's game. It's a casual game, but it's still pretty cool, I think. So anyways, we're going to play a game, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with the tutorial. So I'm going to add a leaderboard, the canonical RethinkDB example, for the game that we're going to play in a minute here. So that's kind of the plan, the agenda here. So question, how many people here, this is an easy one, okay? How many people here have ever created, actually, how many people here think real-time apps are cool? Right? All right, everybody? If your hand's not up, you're probably lost. You're not in the right spot. Okay, so how many people here have ever created any kind of real-time app? All right, pretty good, kind of hard to see. Okay, this one gets a little harder. I've asked this question to a lot of developers lately. So how many people here think about real-time apps on a daily basis? So in other words, when you're at the drawing board and you're solving some problem, you're creating a solution, you truly think about real-time. Okay, so that's better than most people that I've been talking to. So I might be preaching to the choir here. But when I ask that question to a lot of other meetups, overwhelmingly the answer is no. People aren't really considering real-time. And so that's kind of the topic in the first part here. So considering real-time. So the answer that I get from most people is that it's kind of tough. It's tedious. The tools maybe aren't quite right for doing real-time. And so maybe they dabbled in it and they've kind of ruled it out. So it's just kind of tough. And I think that a lot of us have kind of conditioned ourselves so that we don't even consider it. But I think that if that's your mindset, it's probably the time to reevaluate that, especially with some of the things that RethinkDB is doing with change feeds, which you've already seen a little bit of tonight. So why, you may ask? Because it's no longer difficult to do real-time, right? It's actually fairly easy, and hopefully you've probably seen a little bit of that already, and it's my goal to kind of show you that as well. A lot of the pain is gone. In fact, I would say it's becoming almost trivial in some cases to do real-time. So I also think that we're kind of at a point where real-time, there's going to be a wave of adoption, like really pervasive use, partly because the pain is going away, it's becoming easier, which kind of gets us to a tipping point, I think, but also because real-time is often the best solution to problems, but people rarely ever use real-time. So I think there's actually a hidden kind of pent-up demand for real-time, and I think that pent-up demand, for example, it's kind of like when the iPhone came out, right? Before the iPhone came out, nobody thought they needed an iPhone. They didn't know what an iPhone was. Several weeks after the iPhone came out, everybody needed an iPhone, right? It's that kind of a thing where when people see it, they go, okay, yeah, I need that. That's what I need. And so I think that pent-up demand will kind of be an accelerating factor. So here's the kind of the catch. There probably might be some retooling involved, so you may need to learn some new things. That just makes it another day of the week, right? We all learn new stuff all the time, so no big deal. In a few moments here, I'm going to show you what I think is a pretty cool tech stack, what I like. So with the right tools, I think we can do some really cool, awesome, clever stuff, and it's kind of my goal to show you that with our demo app in a second here. All right, so that's enough of me on the soapbox. Now let's get to the cool stuff. All right, so I built a demo for tonight. It's a game, as I mentioned earlier. And kind of the goals I had in mind was I wanted to create something that was, kind of showed you that it's actually kind of easy to do this stuff, and was kind of creative and innovative, and of course I wanted it to be fun. So those were my goals, and here's kind of what I did. I created this thing called dot racing. So if you've ever been to a professional sporting event, you've probably seen this around halftime. They don't do this in the beginning because it's only fun after you've consumed alcohol, right? It's no fun before that, right? So the dot racing, it's like this dots racing around. It's already predetermined, but everybody seems to cheer. However, in our case, you guys are going to actually race dots with your cell phones. Okay, so there's no app to install. You're just going to go to a URL on your phone, and you're going to use your phone, and you're going to tilt it forward, backward, and you're going to drive dots around the screen. Okay, so you're going to do the little racing on your phones. Okay, so that's the plan. We're going to do a demo of it in just moments here. However, alcohol doesn't hurt. It actually is a little more fun with alcohol, so there might be a few more beers back there. All right, so here's how it works. Just a quick overview. So your phone basically creates a real-time connection using Socket.io, and you may not have known this, but your phone in the browser actually has motion events. So when you tilt your phone, you can get motion events, and we're going to send those motion events to our Node.js server, and then that Node.js server is going to send those events down to the browser, and actually the browser, my browser in a minute here, is going to be the game engine. So I've got a real simple physics engine running in the browser. So it's matter.js is a cool little physics engine I'm using. And basically your phone's just going to send events to the browser. The browser is going to hit the physics engine, and those balls are going to move around the track. And we're going to have a real simple little race. Okay. Now, we also are using RethinkDB for two things, to persist the games and also for the leaderboard, which doesn't quite exist yet. It kind of hard-coded a little bit of it, but in the end here, we're going to actually code up the actual leaderboard, the real-time parts of it anyway. Okay, so I need, we're going to have a race. There's only 4 players, so I need 4 volunteers, maybe somebody from over here. Any volunteers? I'll pick somebody if you don't volunteer. Okay, one volunteer. You got to have a modern smartphone, by the way. Over here, somebody? In the back of the room? Okay. Over here, we got somebody in this area over here. There we go. One guy, one person over here. Somebody? Anybody? All right, we'll just wait for somebody. All right, so here's the deal. Go ahead and navigate on your cell phone using Safari for your iPhone or Chrome on your Android phone. Go to race.nothin.com. So this is going to be where you guys are going to be playing from. All right, here you're basically using your phone as a console. This is our game play area. I'm going to go ahead and host a game on my screen. We'll call this the inaugural, can't spell, that's okay, inaugural game. And this is for serious dot racers. All right, everything we're doing here is real time, and we'll kind of look at this towards the end here. All right, so here's our game track. My volunteers, go ahead and sign up. You can use Twitter, you could use GitHub, you could use Google, or you could create an account. You should see a login screen. As soon as they log in, we're going to see the players on the left-hand side of the screen. All right, there we got Sunny. Modern Slacker, whoever that is. Anyone else? Chris? Cool. All right, one more person. Anybody? All right, and while we're waiting for that last person, so one small point. If you've ever played Wii for any amount of time, inevitably you've seen somebody chuck the Wii remote, right? So don't do that with your phone. So hold on to your phone real tightly. I think I'm out of the range of fire, but just in case. All right, so we got 4 people here. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to go ahead and hit Start Game. We're going to see a little countdown on the right-hand side. It's pretty obvious. Lean your phone towards you. It's going to go down, right, up. It's going to go up. All right, so that's the plan. So here we go. Go ahead and cheer on your sections, whoever you are. Oh, wrong way. Oh, somebody in the green needs to turn around and go the other way. Hey, by the way, there's a big green button. If you push that on your phone, your ball will grow, right? So if you want to be kind of like a bastard. All right, Modern Slacker is our winner. All right, so everybody gets the gist of it, right? So that's kind of cool, right? That's pretty fun, right? So there's kind of my point here was you can really do some cool, creative, innovative stuff with real-time. And the thing is, like, nobody's doing real-time. Like, we all kind of know about it, but nobody seems to be doing it. So I think there's a real opportunity to do some cool stuff with real-time. All right. So let's talk through the stack that I used to build this a little bit. Okay, Of course, I used RethinkDB for the persistent data, and we're going to use that in a moment to create our leaderboard. I used Node.js, or you could use IO.js. My actually preference is to use Koa.js, which is kind of a new generation of Node.js frameworks, very unopinionated framework. Socket.io, which you guys have already heard about tonight, and we'll use a little bit of Angular as well. So let's look at each one of those just a tad. All right, so you guys all know what RethinkDB is, right? JSON database, so I'm not going to really go over that. That's been mentioned a few times. Socket.io, I'll kind of repeat a little bit here. Socket.io is a library that creates a continuous real-time connection between the client and the server. And it allows you to do event-based messages between the two in real time. So for example, when our phones were tilting a moment ago, we had these event data, right? X and Y, basically. X, Y, and Z, but we were only using X and Y. That was getting emitted to the server, to the Node.js server, and then it was getting sent back down to my computer, which was really the game engine. And on the server side, we can listen for events, right? So really, we're emitting events and listening to events. That's kind of at its core, that's what Socket.io does. So it allows you to pass event-based messages. I used Koa.js, which is my favorite little framework, unopinionated Node.js framework. The killer feature in Node.js, or in Koa.js, I should say, is that it allows you to ditch callbacks, which we really didn't do a whole lot of in this app. But if you don't care for callbacks, and who does, this might be something to check out if you haven't already. The picture's kind of weird. Anybody know why I put that picture there? Any guesses? Nobody? It's a Koa tree. Yeah, there you go. So I like pictures, so there you go. All right, so then we're going to use Angular a little bit. With two libraries, we're going to use this Socket.io wrapper for Angular, and then we're using this bind table, which is a little library that I'm experimenting with for binding RethinkDB to the client side, and particularly using Angular. So you'll get to see that in a moment here. Just the basics on Angular. It's a model view, whatever type framework. So think of it however you like to, model view controller-ish. Here's kind of the bottom line of how we're going to use it. The leaderboard data is going to be kind of our model. We're going to get that from this library that we're going to use called bind table. And really, it's just getting data from Socket.io streamed down to our client. And then our view, it's just HTML. Technically, it's Jade, if you've seen Jade, which is kind of like HTML. It's language that compiles to HTML, so you'll see that in a moment here. And it has some special Angular syntax, right? So we'll see how we can integrate that in a moment here. Then we've got a controller, which is just a function, and that passes data to our view. And in our specific instance, what we're solving here, just passing data from our model, our bind table instance, to our view. And that's pretty much it. All right, so I'm going to go over, there's kind of like three things we're going to do. We're going to do some live coding. You guys are going to back me up. So if you see me do something stupid, you're going to help me out, because a little bit of pressure here. So here's our plan, though. I'm going to give you an overview first. So the to-do of what we're going to do is we're going to look at the server.js file. This is the entry point to our Node.js application. We're just going to do that so you have a little bit of context on where things are, where we started off, and where we're going. And then we're going to take a look at the then we're going to do the controller, right? So basically, we're going to create this function, this client-side function, and it's actually a controller, and that's what's going to control that data that gets sent from the server to the client-side view. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to modify the view, which is pretty simple, just a little bit of HTML we're going to tweak. And then lastly, we're going to create the server-side event handling. Okay, so we're going to create this change feed, which you've heard several times here, to kind of create our leaderboard and load our leaderboard up. All right, so that's it. Really, we're going to look at something, and then we're going to do three things. We're going to create a controller, we're going to tweak a view, and we're going to modify, or we're going to create an event handler on the server side. All right, so time for a code review. All right, so everybody see that okay? All right, so we're going to start off by looking at this file. Just for a moment, this is the entry point to the Node.js application. If I scroll up, you'll see a bunch of require statements at the top. That's where we pull in the dependencies that we're going to use in this application. There's really kind of three different flavors of it. The first one here, this first line, for example, is the Node.js HTTP library. It just comes with Node. You just get it for free. The other libraries from here to here are third-party libraries you can get from NPM. And so you see Koa, and you see a few other related libraries. We're going to look at those. The last one, this is where we're going to do most of our server-side work, is this local module called game. So you see the reference here is .game. That's actually pointing to this game.js file here. So we're going to come back here in a few moments. But first, we're gonna kind of skip over a few things. There's really not a lot of code here, right? There's like maybe 15 lines of actual working code here. What we're going to look at is this section in here. This is our what we call a returning middleware. This is in Koa.js. This is the middleware that will see the request and will respond to the request. And in our case, we're going to modify this section here. So one thing I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, is this a mobile that a cell phone that's connecting to the server? And if it's a cell phone, I'm going to go ahead and return one response, basically the information you need to be a game controller. And if it's not, then we're going to return this response, right? All this is, so this is basically rendering a Jade file. So if we look at this render function right here, it's actually defined up here, and it's set to look at any files in this views folder, which we're going to go look at in a few moments here. Okay, so we're going to look for a file called index.jade. We don't need to put the extension here because we said the default type is Jade right there. So we're going to go ahead and go into views, and we're going to see a file called index.jade. All right, very vanilla, right? If you've never seen Jade before, a couple of the differences between Jade and regular HTML: you don't see any angle brackets, you don't see any closing tags. It's a very terse language, so it's easy to read, less things for your eyes to look at, so it's a little bit nicer, but there's a little learning curve. And so we're going to actually focus in two areas. This app.js file right here, which is the client-side Angular app, and then we're also going to do a little bit in this little ng templates folder. So for the moment, let's go in here. We'll go into this app.js file, and we're going to do some live coding, and you guys are going to back me up. Make sure I don't do anything really stupid here. All right, so we're going to go into this public folder, and we're going to go into it's already open, JS and app. Okay, so here's our entire AngularJS app. Again, to kind of reiterate before we start doing anything, we're going to create a function. This is going to be our controller. And there's really going to be like maybe 5 lines of code in it. Okay, so we're going to create that function, and then we're going to tell Angular to use it as a controller. We'll come down here at the bottom, and we'll go ahead and create this. So function. All right, so I've got my controller. Here's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and instantiate this bind table, this library I told you about a minute ago. So I need to somehow get a reference to this library called bind table. And in AngularJS, the way that you get dependencies is through dependency injection. So what you do is you just type in the name of the dependency as a parameter in your function. And then the Angular runtime will look at all those parameters, and based on the name, it'll go, oh, well, I know the bind table name. I know what that is, and it just goes ahead and injects that dependency for us. So all I got to do is I just say bind table, and now it's available for me to use within this function. So here's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and create an instance of this bind table class. So I'm going to create a variable called leader controller, and I'm going to set it to bind table. So here's how I use this bind table. I'm going to go ahead and pass in the name of the table that I want to use. So in our case, the name of the table is score. And then I'm going to add one more thing. If I want to do some client-side sorting, I need to add an option for sorting. So I'm going to go ahead and say sort by, and I'm going to say finish, which is a column for the finish time. Right? So that's actually what we're sorting by the entire race finish time. All right, so this creates this instance of my bind table. Now, this is kind of the interesting thing about bind table, is when I call the bind function on bind table, it gives me an array called .rows, which is an array that automatically gets all that data from RethinkDB, and then anytime a change happens, it's automatically streamed to this array, and that array self-maintains itself. So that array automatically updates itself, and the view just kind of automatically updates itself as well. All right, so it's just a little abstraction that I'm playing with. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to first of all call bind. So I'm going to call somebody should have caught this here. That's not what I want to do. So score table dot bind. So I can pass in a filter, just a regular RethinkDB filter if I wanted to. I don't really want to in this case. I'm just going to pass in null. And then 10, that second parameter right there, that's how many records I want. So I want to get the top 10 records. That's basically what I'm saying here. All right, so now what I get to do is I get to attach that rows array, that auto-maintaining array I mentioned a moment ago, to something in the view. All right, so the way that I can pass information to the view is I can use this thing called scope. So I'm going to go ahead and add another dependency to this function. I'll call it scope. And then what I can do is I can just add a property on here. So I'm going to say scope.scores. This is just an arbitrary property I'm assigning to the scope. And then I can do something like this, score table.rows. Okay, so in 3 lines of code there and a little bit of server-side code we're going to do in a minute here, we've basically created a change feed, and we've attached this array that gets created to the scores property in the scope. And now we can just go to the view in a minute here, and we can iterate over that scores array, or the rows array, and render it. So that's what we're going to do. One more thing before we leave here. And actually, I should have pointed this out. Let me go over here real quick. So, oh, somebody's racing. All right, so here's our leaderboard as it stands right now. It's not really finished. I just kind of hard-coded my name in there. We're going to go in and put some actual data in there in a moment. So this is what it looks like, just a simple table. We'll have a picture, we'll have the name, we'll have the game that they played, and then whatever their time was for the total race. All right. Now here's the thing, when somebody navigates away from there, so here I am, I see it, right? It starts a change feed, it streams that data to my view, and as people continue to play, it'll automatically stream updates to my view. That's cool and all, but when I leave, I don't really want that change feed to keep going. I need that change feed to close, so I need to do something on the client side and on the server side to get that change feed to close. So here's what I need to do. I need to listen to some kind of event, some kind of a destruction event, so that when I change views, I can say, hey, go change that, or close that change feed, so we can kind of free up those resources. So here's what I'm going to do. So there's this event that I can listen for on the scope, and it's called destroy. Okay, so basically I'm listening for this event called destroy. This is going to get called when we change views, right? When we change an Angular to some other view. And what I can do here is I can say, okay, well, I want to go ahead and I want to go ahead and unbind. So this is basically going to send a message to the server. It says, hey, that change feed, we don't need that anymore. Go ahead and close that down, free up those resources. Pardon me? Oh, there we go. Thank you. You guys are helping me. Cool. All right. So this is just a function. At this point, Angular is not even aware of this function. As far as it's concerned, it's just a function that may get used somewhere else. So what I need to do is I need to register this function as a controller. So we're going to come up here. We're going to register this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say controller. I'm going to say leader controller. This is the Angular name. And then I'm going to pass in the actual function name. All right, so that registers the controller. There's one more thing we need to do. We need to tell Angular when to use that controller. So at this point, it recognizes it as a controller, but it doesn't really know when it should use that. The way we do that is up at the top here. I have these routing rules on this state provider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to this leader route, right, this leader state, if you will, which happens to correspond to this leader path right here. So if we were to look at this path, you'll see that here's the leader path, right? So in Angular, it says, I know what to do when you go to this leader path. It's going to go ahead and grab this template right here, which we're going to go modify in a moment here. But it also needs a controller. We need some kind of controller to grab that data and send it to the view. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and specify this controller property. And we just need to give it the name that we just told Angular about. So it was the, what was it, leader controller. All right, so 3 things we did there. Created a simple function, we registered it as a controller, and we assigned it to a state or a route, if you want to think of it in those terms. Okay, so we've pretty much done all the client-side stuff except for the view. So what we need to do is we need to go tweak this view, this game view right here. I'm sorry, the leader view, I should say. So there's two ways that Angular can get to that view. It can actually be a real GET request. So in other words, there could be an actual GET path that's templates/leader that could go and kind of lazy load when it needs it. Or the way I kind of like to do it is I actually pass it in as at initial load as a script tag. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go look in this thing called ng templates. If you recall a moment ago, I pointed out that we're going to use this JS app, and we're also going to use this ng templates right here. This is where I have all the client-side templates that we use in this simple app. So we're going to go tweak that real quick. All right, so if we look here, we see a few different views. So if you're not familiar with this, we're basically using a script tag, but the type is this ng template, and the browser looks at that and goes, well, I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to do nothing. So it doesn't display anything. But then in the Angular side of things, we basically can grab the content of the script tags, and we can use that in different views. So what we're going to do is we're going to tweak this last one, which is the leaderboard, and we're going to iterate over that scores array that we made available to it through the scope. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to add an attribute. It's called ng repeat. And we're going to say score in scores. So this scores that I referenced right here, that's what I made available way down here in the bottom. And so that's where I attached it right here. So I basically said, take that row, those rows that we bound using score table, expose that to our view using that scope object. So that's going to allow us to iterate over our records. And then what I need to do is I need to swap out the appropriate hard-coded parts here with the relevant stuff. So I'm going to use curly braces, and I'm going to go ahead and plug in, I think this is score.player.picture. And I'll do score.player.name. And we'll do score.game.name. And then lastly will be the time here. Score.finish. Okay, so we've done all the client-side stuff. So not a lot of code, right? I kind of talked a lot, but really just a few lines of that controller function. Then we kind of registered that function in AngularJS. Then we just tweaked the view here to actually render that stuff. Anybody see any problems? Did I screw anything up? No? All right, I hold you guys partly accountable if it doesn't work, so it's okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the server side, right? So the bind table actually creates that change feed, but we actually need to go on the server side to handle that. So basically, bind table is going to emit an event that we need to listen to and create a change feed for. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go peek back at the server.js file. So here's kind of where we left off. We went to the client side from here. Now down below this, we see a few different things. We see that reference that I pointed out earlier to game. Right, and this is the file we're going to actually go modify. So you see that game has a function called setup. Setup gets passed an instance of socket.io. Right, so we'll go see that in a second here. So let's go into our game.js file. And you see that function setup. Okay. All right, so I'm on a clock, so we're going to go fast here. So at the very bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and create a socket on event. So I'm going to listen for event that bind table library is going to emit. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and say score, which is the table name. This is the convention. So score changes start. Okay, then I'm going to pass in a function. And I'll go ahead and take some data with it and potentially a callback function. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of different variables. I'll say let, limit, and filter. And we'll go ahead and say limit equals. So if you remember when I called the change table a few moments ago, I'm sorry, the bind table bind function a few moments ago, we passed in a limit, that 10 records. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say data.limit. So that gets passed in. And if it weren't passed in, we could put some kind of default value there. Then I'll say filter equals data.filter. Or we could set up some kind of default filter if it wasn't passed. Now here's where I get to the requel, what you've already seen tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and say R which is the connection to the database. Then I'll say table, and then I'm going to say score. And then I'm going to go ahead and do an order by clause. So order by, I've already created this index field called finish, so I'm going to say index finish. Oops, did I spell that? Okay. So then I'm going to continue to chain on a few additional things here. So I'm going to go order by, I'm going to pass in that filter. Oops. And I'll pass in the filter, then I'll go ahead and do the limit. And then we'll call our changes. This creates our change feed. All right, then I'll call, and calling changes will return a promise in this case, so I'm going to go ahead and call it then. And I'll pass in a function. And we'll go ahead and get our cursor in this function. That's what gets passed in here. So then we're basically at the point we saw the prior demos where we'll call cursor.each. We're going to iterate over that array. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass in, and it takes an error, and it takes the record. So at this point, what I can do is I can just start sending that data to the across socket.io back down to our client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say socket. Okay, so all right, so we got our socket. We're going to go ahead and emit. And then here's what we're going to emit. We could actually key in an actual string here, or I could, what I want to do is I'm going to use the event name that's passed in from the client side. So I've got this thing called data change event name. And then I'm going to pass in the record. Okay, so basically that's what I need to do on server side to start sending records to the client side. One catch here is when we no longer need this change feed, we need to close it. So I need to add 2 more things, and we're almost done here. And I'm going to kind of skip over some error handling in the sake of time here. So cursor we're emitting. Now here's what I need to do is I want to listen to a couple of events. So anytime there's a data oops, that's not it. So anytime the client says, hey, I don't need to listen to you anymore, it's going to send an event, and the name of that event's passed into this function. Right, so I don't have to actually name it. Here's passed from the client side. And then I'm going to call this stop cursor function, which doesn't exist yet. Then I'm going to go ahead and do one more here, socket dot on, and then I'll say disconnect. So if we happen to just close our browser, we need to listen for that and close out the change feed as well. And we'll call stop cursor. All right, so let's create this function called stop cursor. All right, so then what we're going to do in here is we're going to basically call cursor.stop. Okay? All right, one more thing and we're done, and hopefully it works. All right, so when we call stop, we need to remove those event listeners, otherwise they'll just kind of stay there indefinitely. By the way, if you ever watch you've seen my typing tonight, right? Kind of sucks. But if you watch my screencast, you'll notice I never make a typo. That's because I have this, oops. Oh, well, apparently there's something blocking it. I created a, oh, there it goes. So, this is how I do it on the screencast, because it's so super annoying to watch typos on the screencast. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it in here, and then we'll go ahead and we're going to add remove event listener. And all right, you guys with me? We're done. All right, so basically we did several things. We created the client-side stuff, and then on the server side, we basically just set up a listener, which created a change feed and started emitting that data, and then we listened for a couple events so that we could close out that change feed. All right. Actually, so I'm using RethinkDB dash, which doesn't require it. Yep. All right. So let's see, we'll try this on the client side. Okay, so apparently it worked. I think I'm out of time, so I'm not going to push this code, or maybe I will. But so I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Kind of my goal was to kind of show you something kind of interesting. Hopefully the takeaway is you'll start to consider it, because I think there's lots of opportunities with real-time. because frankly, it's really cool, and hardly anybody's doing real time, and I think there's going to be a big demand at some point. So anyway, any questions?